This is Dan Schneider. On this Dan Schneider video interview, I'm speaking with Rick Moses, an American actor and musician, and we'll be talking about his career in both of the arts. Rick Moses is an actor and a musician, and we'll be speaking about both art forms. I do want to explore initially his background. So, Rick, welcome. And if you could give me a little background to people who don't know you about your life and your family. I know your brother is also an actor, William Moses. Do you come from a family of actors or artists, musicians? What is the family artistically inclined?
Well, I would say, yeah, the family is certainly artistically inclined. In the case of my mother and father, my father was a gifted singer, but he had a career in advertisement. He was Richard Moses. And my mother was Marion McCargo Moses, and then returned after divorce, returned to her professional name of Marion McCargo. As an actress, had a distinguished career. Curiously, she probably, I remember reading lines with my mother when I was around 10 years old, and she had, I sort of gravitated towards that about the same time that I had expressed an interest in that. And so it was sort of so I was involved as an early teenager and in acting in particular. And let's see, and my mother ended up having a rather impressive career, Marion McCargo. So that's that. And of course, I'm the oldest of four sons of Richard Moses and my mother. And she adopted three children in her second marriage from Alfonso Bell Jr. And so she became the mother of seven, effectively. And four Moses and three Bell kids. I would say that everyone's artistic, and of course, Billy has had a distinguished career. My youngest brother, of my birth mother, if you will. And so anyway, that gives you Tony Bell is the youngest of the adopted children, and he has had an impressive career in Los Angeles politics, I think, as an advisor and publicist.
Other than acting and music, is there any other art form that you pursue? I mean, do you paint? Do you do sculpting, or is it just are those the two main forms of that you've pursued?
Well, I was always, from the earliest age, I think I understood I should be an actor. My father was a naturally gifted singer. He had an impressive career in advertising as an executive, but he wasn't a professional. But I don't think I ever heard a better singer than my father. So he was an influence. And I was involved in athletics, and I'd become a All-American swimmer in high school, and early on, I was involved in martial arts, and was involved in the timeline where I entered into it around 13 years old. Bruce Lee was actually one of my instructors, so that's sort of an interesting footnote.
Bruce
there.
Lee, the martial artist?
Yeah. That was he used to be friends with Dan Inosanto, who would teach a kids class over at Ed Parker's dojo. Ed Parker being famous for his Kenpo karate style, which Elvis adopted, Elvis Presley, and so they were friends. He was friends with Dan Inosanto, so he would sort of peripherally teach, and I was aware of him, of course, as his appearance on the Green Hornet TV show, and had been a big fan. There's just serendipitous things that have happened.
So, having interviewed a few dozen actors, a lot of them do have other art forms. It sounds from what you just said that I believe you used the term something like that you were sort of like born into acting or whatnot. So do you consider yourself an actor first and a musician second, or are they co-equal?
I think they became co-equal, but I thought of myself as an actor first, and from the beginning, it ended up I spent as I had as a teenager, I played in rock and roll bands in high school and was blessed with a musical gift. My interest in it was when I became uh, the right age, if you will, to play Hamlet, say 18, that one becomes aware that where you might be suitable for the role casting wise, it's traditionally played by actors who are established in their 30s and 40s, playing a much younger man. So I, realizing that wasn't likely to happen, I addressed myself to applying my sensibility as an actor to with the music, and was performing in nightclubs, and became known from that, and ultimately became cast because of that. And people who became aware of me as a singer would cast me as an actor, and then I would sort of bounce back and forth. If I may ask a question, just a question, how did I come to your attention?
Oh, years ago, I saw you in General Hospital as the Hutch, but I thought that was the earliest I had seen you until I looked on like your IMDb,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw you were young Daniel Boone, and I remember that show was only on for like 3 or 4 weeks or something, and I remember thinking I enjoyed when I was a kid the Fess Parker show. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't make the connection that you were him. So I originally, because I watched General Hospital for decades now, and you were one of
Mm-hmm.
my favorite characters when I first started watching in the late '70s, early '80s. But I didn't realize that I had seen you before as the Daniel Boone character.
Well, that's right. So I was the lead actor in a primetime series on CBS um, before doing General Hospital,
Yeah.
and that's sort of interesting insofar as the General Hospital. I didn't really have a focus on soap operas.
Mm.
I didn't think much of them. Uh, at that time in my life. I think a lot of them now, actually. But my point was that they asked for me, and I, to be polite, I had an agent that encouraged me to take the meeting as a courtesy. And this woman, Gloria Monty, who was the producer, pitched a storyline that I thought was intriguing, that the Hutch character you talked about. And I thought, well, nevertheless, you guys don't want me. And then then she introduced me to Tony Gary, and we
Yeah.
read a little bit. And Tony, I loved him. He was a brilliant actor, and I felt a connection. But I really didn't think in terms of people watching soap operas. To me, it seemed a very peripheral. Since I'd been in nighttime television,
Mm.
it seemed a peripheral thing, and certainly not an interesting career move to me. But I found the storyline engaging. I thought me cast against my blonde, California-ish persona as the hitman's hitman, I thought was an interesting card to play, and I liked the looseness and intellectual sharpness of Tony Gary, and looseness and very free as an actor, but very intellectually sharp. And I thought that would be worth doing. So anyway, it became obviously very popular, thank God.
Yeah.
And
Now let me just ask, because you after that Luke and Laura on the run mob story ended, your character sort of drifted. They tried to pay you up with an actress named Loanne Bishop, her character, and then I guess did your contract end? Is that why you left the show?
let's see. I think it was just I had become less interested. I felt that it was good in the storyline we had with Tony and I, and it was just a parting of the ways. I didn't really think they extended my contract initially, and then we didn't want to continue. That's about it. And I was interested in doing other things,
Yeah.
and so was in a sense looking for a way out. But I have no regrets. It was a wonderful experience, and I remember Loanne was lovely, and I don't think it was sort of a last ditch effort to do something with that, and they kind of sensed that none of us wanted to continue. So I think it's a mutual parting of the ways.
So let me just sort of backtrack, because when we talk about an actor or a singer, we're talking about performance art, where usually you're taking someone else's words or music and you're putting your own spin on it. However, you're also a songwriter, and so you become sort of the demiurge, where that was one of my cats. Come on, Thor, stop. Sorry, one of my cats. He's old and a little demented, but
Yeah.
um, uh, so you become the actual creator when you're writing songs. Did have you experienced that only with songwriting, or have you written, say, short stories or anything outside of music as well?
Well, the answer is yes. I've written a lot, but my earliest immersion in writing was as a composer, as a in capturing the ethos of the day of the singer songwriter. But I had a broad background, admiration for the Tin Pan Alley sound, the Great American Songbook, if you will, exemplified by the sort of catalog of people like Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. And I had been an admirer of Anthony Newley, who was indeed extraordinary actor, singer, composer, and so I brought that to the table. But my visceral ethos was rock, so I tended to compose in the rock genre. But I had this influence of, as you say, Sinatra and Anthony Newley, and um, I guess that's for example. But go ahead and ask follow up a question there.
Well, it's interesting because, uh, as I said before we actually started recording, your manager had sent, or your agent had sent a link to Here Now, which has like your 10 or 12 albums going back to the late 70s through the latest one. And so, in listening to some of the older stuff, I listened to the last two or three albums, and I listened to, like, I think the first one, the oldest one, and then a few songs here and there. uh, it's interesting because your style, if you will, has progressed more from what you might call late 70s, 80s power pop to a more, I don't know if you know, there's a thing called Western swing music, which is a sort of a throwback to the 40s. There's a trio of sisters called the Quavy sisters that sort of sound like the Andrews sisters. And you have your music in the last decade or so is more trending towards that. I would call it maybe bluegrass. It's less pop and more bluegrass, almost swingish. I mean, I'm not a musical expert. What, how do you define it, and how have you been moving in that direction?
Well, it's interesting. I think what you're picking up is probably just sort of that older school, early American, Great American Songbook influence. Uh, and in terms of a sound, I was playing live pretty hard rock, but after a while you start thinking, let me make music that I'd like to listen to any time of the day, and hopefully other people would. But it's still rock oriented, so I can't really account for the. Although you mentioned a kind of country swing influence, and certainly country music, there's the storytelling component. So I'm always interested in bringing to the table something that to me is interesting as an actor, as it's got a good script that it's. That's the evolution of it. It's purely visceral. There's no particular stylistic choice.
And also, your singing early on was more traditionally singing, whereas in the last handful of albums, maybe it's more moved towards quasi spoken word. As you know, it's less breathy, and it's less necessarily musical, and it's more almost like, it sounds almost like you're a sage speaking about certain whatever the songs are about, and it's probably about, maybe I'd say 65-70% of the way towards the spoken side rather than singing side. How did that evolve?
Again, just responding to the text, I have a sense that as a writer, that certain things come to me, and it's very much like taking dictation from. I don't see why not to say who else would one take dictation from. I have a sense of taking this dictation from God. So but it doesn't. Sometimes it comes fully blown words and music all at once. Sometimes it's a little piece of an idea and it's developed, and you sort of hammer away at it until it shapes up. But I wouldn't choose to record or perform something live if it didn't intrigue me as an actor, and think that there was a substantive message that people could benefit from. So it has to be interesting to me, and I think that people would benefit from it. So that's really my only criterion, and what comes out comes out. You know?
And one song that you recorded in '79, and then in this last album, is a song called Highway, and an interesting difference, because obviously, there's a 40+ year difference, but there's also sort of like a world weariness to that song. I mean, the image of a highway, eternity going on, and it's almost as if you're singing it as the character within the song, but further down, or almost to the horizon, where the earliest song, the character is here with the recipients, the listeners. But now it seems that the character within the song, as you sing it in the 22 version, is almost to the horizon from where the earlier song started. There's a world weariness, and you can make arguments for either version of the song being superior or whatnot. But was that again just happenstance, since you are 40+ years older, or was there a choice that you made in rendering the song differently?
Well, yeah, it came rather easily. I am blessed with a lot of children, by most people's standards. I have 6 sons, and they range between in their 40s to their early 20s. And I get feedback in the family, if you will, from certain pieces of material they're responding to, and sometimes it's newer stuff, and sometimes it's older stuff. And I was aware that was a song. I think particularly my son Adam was mentioning is something he wanted to do. He's a very gifted composer and songwriter himself, as well as a filmmaker, and he was said he wanted to record that song, and so I just sort of picked it up again. And it hadn't been one that I had performed. We'd done it on the album for 20th Century Fox. Rick Girard was the producer, brilliant producer, and it's had a lot of excellent, well-known musicians on that recording. But I just picked it up with the guitar and started, and it appealed to me. It appealed to my sensibility just viscerally as a singer. So and thought. With my kids calling my attention to it, I would share what it meant to me now, and I think you analyzed it rather well. There's, technically speaking, I wrote that beyond with a lyrical sensibility that would seem to be beyond my years, and now I can say for certain, I know that there are fundamental truths in that. So you do get this A-B effect. One could go back and forth and listen. If I may say, for the benefit of the audience, my newest album is called The Heart of the King. Rick Moses, The Heart of the King. It's on all the systems like Spotify, etc. And it's that the new version is on that album, The Heart of the King, and the old version is on the record for 20th Century Fox called, what's it called?
I think it's just Rick Moses.
No, it's called Face the Music, was the title of that album. Yeah. So anyway, that's just as a talking point. But I'm really glad you picked up on that. I think that's a very thoughtful. I looked into your life a bit and saw you have a sensibility as a poet. So I admire that, and I thought we'd have interesting discussions when I learned that. So anyway.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the value of intimacy in art, because when you're an actor, you may be doing intimate scenes, with another actor or an actress, whether they're sexual or not. When you're on stage, you may be singing a song about some tragic moment or some intimate moment there, and yet there's this duality that you're on stage, or you're being watched by millions of people on a television show or on a movie screen, or nowadays, people watch on their cell phones, and yet you have to maintain that sort of facade that this is an intimate moment, even though you know that people are listening or viewing you or the character. And is there ever a tension that can build up from that that can be used in service to the music or to the moment that you're acting, in the sense that uh, uh, it wouldn't be that there is all art in a sense is fake, in the sense that you're put into a situation, you're in a Shakespeare play, you're not the character, but you have to sort of pretend you are, so that you can evoke something in the listener, the audience. What is, is there a sort of duality between the intimate and the public in those moments?
That's you're sort of going to the heart of what is acting and what makes it compelling to for someone to watch it, and why would someone be interested in doing it? Um, if you're looking at great performers, there's a there in spite of the fact that we all know it's not real. Uh, it has the ring and feel of truth, and that's because in the moment that the audience is seeing it in a good performance, that's what it is. It is in fact truth. The actor is not faking anything. He, in a sort of spiritual sense, uh, God or the creative process, however you want to phrase it, knows what acting is and knows what we're doing. So here's the story. I understand there's a story that should be told, and but there's an audience and there's noise and there's lights, and it's not a natural thing for people to stand dealing with intimate subjects in public. So, but yet that's the job. So you say, okay, the light, the noise. I hope if you can hear me, there's a
Yeah.
garbage truck going by. Do you want me to pause for a
No,
second?
no, that's fine. I don't,
You
I
can
don't
hear
hear
it.
it.
All right. So the you simply let all those things affect you, and you don't hide it, and you don't fake it, and then you still say, when the knock on the door comes, you say, yes, who is it? Or if the woman reaches her hand to you, you take the hand, and you let what's instinctive, and your conscious mind knows what acting is, your conscious mind knows what the story is, and you let these things take over. And so the audience, when it works, it's because nothing's fake, and then we can become involved. So anyway, I
Okay.
thought it's a very interesting question you asked.
So Rick, I wanted to talk a little bit about the personal too, because in looking you up, and I remember a few years ago I tried to interview you, and I saw that you had converted to Judaism, and I wanted to talk about the sense of the spiritual in the art and also in your religious choice, because a lot of artists sometimes view what or the place of art in their lives has the place that religion has in a lot of other people. So, can you speak on number one, just what brought you to Judaism, and then secondly, how does Judaism and the will to make art, whether it's acting or music, how do they compare? What places do they occupy in your life?
Well, I have a. I'll try to answer it. My goal as a young man, I always had a sense that there is God. So there was never my mother was a Sunday school teacher. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll move away from the noise if that helps you.
Okay.
Hang on a second. Hi, I'm doing an interview right now. Okay. Um, so my mother had a sense that she was a Sunday school teacher and simply going through the motions. I was raised in the Episcopal church, and my mother was a Sunday school teacher, so we'd go to church and you read the Bible and you start within the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And of course, that moves on through the narrative of the Garden of Eden and the flood, and the patriarchs and Moses and the Jews at Mount Sinai. and eventually Jesus and the Nativity, the birth, and the Sermon on the Mount, and all of that. And just as a child, I was spontaneously, I'm seeing if I can get back where I was. Uh, I was spontaneously interested in the Old Testament. It just, that's the way what I responded to. Always loving and having great affection for the Christian ethos, and still to this day have that. That's just what I gravitated to. So eventually, so I was always looking for some kind of cosmic truth, and it seems to me there's a phrase by Rabbi Raphael Shimshon Hirsch who says that art can be a bridge to God. Now, I only learned that phrase a few years ago, but that's the sense that I had as a child. That this is why art is compelling to me. This is why acting, filmmaking, film, drama, stage, music, this is what's compelling to me. And so you're saying this is a way to get there. That's the sensibility that I had. And it proved to be true. And I did make, so at a certain point in my life, after I had one of the great miracles of life, of course, was having children. And so I had one son, and that was astonishing. And and that was a bigger miracle than I could ever have imagined. And then another son, and again, equal miracle. And suddenly in my mid-30s, I have a third son. And I'm saying, whoa, you know. So that's, and suddenly I'm rereading the Bible. So, but anyway, but I'm reading the Bible with an interesting set of circumstances. I had some astonishing gift come to me. I was always a naturally fast reader, and suddenly I could read maybe 10 times faster for no apparent reason, even though I was faster than average uh, most of my life. And so I would read virtually everything. I started rereading the classics, rereading Dostoevsky and reading Shakespeare volume by volume. And I'd have to read 5 or 6 books at once. And while I'm on it, I said, well, while I'm at it, I might as well reread the Bible. And suddenly, not suddenly, but after getting through maybe the 5 books of Moses and through the books of what's called the Tanakh, and maybe I'm around the 2nd book of Kings, and it's long ago that it occurred to me, wait a minute, this isn't like other stuff. This isn't like the rest of literature. There's another element here. So that's the impetus for me to, if you will, convert. But converting, one doesn't need to do any sociological conversion. One has the relationship they have with God, no matter what church or religion or synagogue they affiliate with. But I had children, and living in society is a part of life, and so it was a natural inclination that my second wife and the mother of my 4 youngest children is a Moroccan Jewish woman, and so I had already been on a pathway. My orientation was towards the Old Testament, realizing that placed me more in Jewish theology than Christian theology. Although, as I always emphasize, I'm a great admirer of Christian theology, and of the sum total of that in its manifestation. I think Christianity is the instrument through which I, as a child, become aware of what's called the Torah and the 5 books of Moses, and it's been a huge blessing for the world, and a blessing for Jews, for that matter. So anyway, but you convert to Judaism to raise your children a certain way, and that's in public. So go ahead.
So, since art is basically communication, I always say that art is more of a verb than a noun. It's the how whatever is being communicated is communicated. Do you see yourself then as an actor or a musician as a vessel for conveying, whether it's a spiritual truth, whether it's just a momentary sense of joy in, maybe say a little song that is intended to just to be fluff, or so do you consider yourself the vessel, for some higher truth, or do you consider yourself also a creator of certain truths that you're going to bring out in a performance, whether it's on stage or it's acting?
Well, all of the above, but with the forced attempt at humility to say that I think there's only all creativity is essentially is divine. So all we can be is vessels for creativity. And so I don't suggest that I am the creator, but certainly I'm a vessel. And I do think that anything any of us does that's good, whether one's aware of it or not, it comes from uh, even the most uh, atheistically bent artist will acknowledge that he's getting something from above. Everyone has a different way of characterizing what's that thing above, where's it coming from, or something outside of themselves. I think there's a famous Stanislavski quotation that, or is that Michael Chekhov? The secret of acting is the concentration of attention outside of oneself. So you become open when you're not thinking about how I feel or think, but what did she say? And what the hell is that? And you're having an honest reaction to whatever's outside you. That's what becomes engaging. And that can become a wonderful artistic tool, shaped in the right vehicle. And that can, a film can have that, a stage play can have that, a poetic reading could have it, and certainly an actor or a singer on a stage can be engaged in that process in the narrative of a song. And I do find the song compelling, of course, dramatically.
But certainly different artists are going to have different goals in their careers, in their creative careers. Certainly, a group like the Rolling Stones is going to be having a different agenda than, say, a singer like Luciano Pavarotti, an opera star. You're going to have a different agenda than, say, Britney Spears. So I mean, there is the imprint. There are the thumbprints of you on your art. But you're saying that that comes after the initial creative force that just comes to you.
Yeah, I would say you set out to become something, and initially you fake it, and eventually you can become that what you set out to be. So the I'm paraphrasing a line that I think I read in a biography of Cary Grant, the actor who was born a street performer in England, and his name was Archibald Leach, and he said he invented a character named Cary Grant,
Yeah.
And eventually I became him.
Yeah.
You know, so who could be more urbane? Who could be more witty, sophisticated, and a man of his time in that sense than the persona of Cary Grant? And yet he's a Cockney street performer, acrobat. Yet he became what he wanted to be. Anyway, to this issue that you were saying about individuality, the instrument we have is that which is given by God. So we use that thing that we are, and we go with that and be true to it. And though even you and I might be different, if I could be completely true to myself, you would connect to that. And if you can be completely true to yourself, I will connect to that, even though we're different. And that's why artists can be so wonderful. There's a sense that we are, at some level, individuals though we may be, we're also connected. And there we have this, so there you go.
So let me get back to acting though, and how this applies to acting, because as I've mentioned, I've done about 30 something interviews with actors, and there's a whole range of approaches to acting, and I'm not just talking method acting versus this or that. I mean, there have been actors that I've talked to that have said, oh, I just know my lines, I go there and I pretend. Whereas other actors, I've had a few people who do that method thing, and they're very intense, and this is This is them, whether they're trying to get away from their real self or whether they're trying to embody uh, uh, who they are in their creativity. There's many different approaches. Some, I've always said, how does an actor get behind the eyes of the character? We don't really care what the actor looks like, but what is that actor seeing, or what is that actor bringing to the table to wrench the audience into something new? Where do you fall on the spectrum as an actor in that?
Well, I wanted to be an actor that could do anything, and I think by the time I was in my late 20s, I had achieved that goal from my own perspective. I believed that I could act anything at the highest level, as high as anybody in the world was my own sense of myself, rightly or wrongly. And however, I made a decision. I don't care if I can do something. There's another question that comes to the table. What should I do? This is storytelling. What's the story? And what's the point of the story? And what's the point of the piece? And at that point, um, uh, I'm going to be very selective. And there's certain journeys that I might be technically capable of engaging as an actor. So I'm just not interested in doing that. And I don't like what the net effect of it would be. That doesn't mean that I have to think the character is particularly admirable. I have to think that there's a purpose that's higher. There's some higher purpose to the message of the piece. So, people are going to have different standards to that point. That did end up me becoming, if you will, uh, not willing to do anything that was offered, virtually everything that was offered to me, and more inclined to turn to writing my own material, and that's something that I thought was in its own way valid, and in film, and particularly though the the more viable form, the more immediate form, where you can get it on its feet faster. Because all I need is me and a guitar, or me and a piano, or me and a four-piece band, and we can we can bring something to life. And so, a well-structured song can do that as well as anything. And so, I've been gratified to spend a lot of years of my life on stage doing that. In my sense, I'm functioning as an actor, but I had the ability to sing was effortless for me, if you will. The form of music and the structure of it came to me as a gift from God, literally. So I used it as an actor, and still do. And that's
Yeah. So you just mentioned Cary Grant and how Cary Grant had spent years as Archibald Leach becoming Cary Grant, creating the facade of Cary Grant. Uh, am I to say what I seem to be getting is that are you Rick Moses perfecting Rick Moses or are you acting as Rick Moses the musician, or you know what I'm saying? Is there that meta thing there that are you primarily the musician, or are you the actor who is morphing into the musician playing a role?
well. I'm happy to say that because of what we talked about earlier, probably certainly by my early 30s, Rick Moses became who Rick Moses is. I did, you build yourself to a certain point, and finally, I'm not faking it anymore. That's really who I am, and I wouldn't know how to undo it, nor would I want to, but I wouldn't even know how. This is just what I am. So that became. I realized retroactively, hey, that was part of the goal of this thing, wasn't it? If you go back to one's childhood. So you become a man, and you do what men do, and and frankly, that becomes you're turning to the religious concept. What is existence? What's the meaning of life? What is everything for? And so now I suggest everyone, you want to challenge yourself with those things. You got to be honest. You got to be truthful. You got to be straight. You got to try to be the best that you can be in all areas of life, no matter what that is. Doesn't mean you'll succeed, but that's your conscious effort. And then if you want to really get somewhere, you better be a person who, you don't have to be religious in any conventional sense, but you better know what the 5 books of Moses say. From in the beginning, God created the heavens, the earth, to the 10 Commandments, and what happens during the Exodus. You better know those things, and you're not going to be. You're going to have a very difficult life if you don't. And having said that, I'm professionally, and what I spend my time doing, if I'm not talking about these things in particular, is I create art to the best of my ability, to try to communicate that in another way. So because so that comes back to, why put out music at all? Why do anything? You could just vibe with God, but we're here to talk to each other and to communicate and to interact and to share life and elevate each other in some way.
So
And
has music been more of a flight from fakery? Do you find it more genuine or authentic art than acting?
no, I find it the same thing. It's simply, it's I just as an anecdote, when I left General Hospital and I said, let me start writing my own material, I developed numbers of screenplays and got a development deal with Merv Griffin's company, who wanted me to, and I did a demonstration of, I shot the opening of a film called Jack Takes a Vacation, so people can look at that online.
Yeah, sure.
I'm very proud of it. And from that, Merv, signed me up to produce and direct and act and in my own material. Now there's a long process, and there's politics involved, and there's all kinds of other things. Eventually, we had a parting of the ways, but it's only because I'm only going to do that if it's going to be what I think should be said. And if they want to change the structure of it, no, it's not just that I can get in the movies. That ain't it for me. It has to be a message I agree. And if we disagree, then no harm, no foul. You guys go your way, and I'll go mine. And best of luck. That's life. So having said that, the things that were then I had some success in. I'm trying to think if that was before or after the Griffin thing. I had some success with a record in Europe and in Germany in particular. Anyway, I was always performing. I'm sorry, I'm digressing a little bit, but because you asked a more esoteric and philosophical question, so put me back on track, please.
Well,
Okay.
but you did use the term fake or fakery, and so that resonates in a lot of Hollywood stuff. If you look in the last 5 or 6 years with the Me Too movement and a lot of the issues that women in the arts and especially in acting and Hollywood acting have dealt with. Um, uh, there always seems to be some agenda, whether it's a sexual agenda by a producer, whether it's an agenda that's based just on how fast can we churn the crap out. What do you mean when we are we talking about the typical idea of Hollywood fakery? That it's an industry that isn't sincere, that talents are wasted because of things.
No, in my case, if you're referring to the Jack Takes a Vacation experience with Merv's company, is that the illusion? Do they want to change something? It wasn't that they didn't have good ideas. I chose to do something with that particular project called Jack Takes a Vacation. It was a sort of a modern American Western, and the themes are, there is good and there is evil, and it's the lines are blurry sometimes, but you're gonna have to make a choice, and you better be serious about it. Uh, they had some ideas in which they wanted to move into comedy, and I said, look, I love comedy, but you're not going to change. We're not going to introduce that here. That's another project. And so they wanted to turn an apple into an orange. So there's no, but the idea of the orange that they had was a perfectly good orange, but I'm doing an apple this time. So that's all I'm saying. So I wasn't about faking anything, and they didn't even have bad ideas, just had different ideas. And So, but going to the idea of something being fake in and of itself, um, I'd be more concerned. Please reframe the question so I don't go off on a tangent, if you will.
Well, it's just that as I said, the term fakery that you used, it has generally, especially in the last handful of years, as I said, with the Me Too stuff, there's a decrying of the fakery of Hollywood, whether it's dealing with women, whether it's dealing with minority characters, stories getting out, the Oscar voting stuff, being mostly white males up until a few years ago, and that it doesn't reflect reality as it is, the real reality of America, as a lot of people would look at it. I was just wondering if that was sort of what you were alluding to.
No, not at that time. I have opinions on all of those things, but the that wasn't the issues that were affecting me. We were all sort of living in a common reality. But I think there's a sense that there are. For me, it's just like I'm very clear about certain things. That's why I'm doing it. If you're on board with that, great. And if you're not on board with that, that's cool. But I know what I'm doing and I know what I'm saying. That's the value. So I'm just talking about what I'm going to stay true to. I understand there are ways to develop other ideas, and one could do those with creativity and make them engaging and possibly even valid. But you can't turn an apple into an orange. So let's just stick. You want an orange? Let's do an orange. You want an apple? Let's do an apple. But certain things are. So anyway, that's all I was talking about. That so, but to come full circle, I've been able to. If one was interested in the sum total of what I'm doing now, I would direct them to listen to my album, particularly "The Heart of the King," and you're not really selling music these days. You're offering music because once you're in the mainstream platforms, which I'm blessed to be, along with a lot of other people, and a lot of wonderful music out there. I'm in people's. If you're using Spotify or iTunes or Apple Music, whatever, I'm in all those systems. They've already bought the music. I'm not interested in that because that's a done deal. But I am interested that people should, if they want to know what I'm about, a lot of it is in the music. And it's meant to be, it's not monodimensional. It doesn't repeat the same ideas over and over again. It, but there are themes that one will observe that I think are useful to people. And, you know, and it could be, and it might be fun for people to hear it. But if not, that's cool because I'm okay. Thank you, God.
Rick, you just stated that your music has useful themes for others. Can you enumerate a few of those themes? And because sometimes I've always thought that an artist is putting out something that the cosmos is lacking. So what is it that you're putting out there that without Rick Moses would not be there?
Oh, well, since God is the master of the universe, it's not that the universe is lacking. It's people's perception that is lacking, So, and there's a lot of wisdom in art. And so it's not that it's not there. But I do think that the culture moves away from wisdom and can become at best frivolous, and at worst uh, it manifests in a kind of malevolence. There are real things in life, and if you don't get it right, uh, it's going to be very, very problematic for the human life. So, what is the purpose of the human life? So, I'm saying particularly for young men or middle-aged men or older men, I'm talking to men first. But insofar as men and women are designed to interact with each other, there's a we need to understand each other. It's good for women to understand men. It's good for men to understand women. So that a lot of that, there's a lot of sex in my music. There's a lot of lust, love, and thought, and it's in the music. and so that's a lot of life, So I'm hoping that it can benefit people, but if you don't want to get it through the music, we can just talk straight about those things directly. That's cool too. So I'm just saying it is in the music, and now since we're talking, let's use that.
But when we're
And
talking about ideas, that's basically what philosophy is. Art, I've
right.
always said, philosophy is ideas. Art is ideas in motion. Art puts the ideas of philosophy into service of something else. Do you agree with that, generally speaking?
I absolutely do, but let me address the subject of song with a capital S, if you will.
Yeah.
There's thought that can be expressed lyrically, and its aspiration is to something that's even beyond thought, that's both visceral, meaning worldly, and metaphysical, and that music itself, the juxtaposition of words that are sincerely trying to do that with music of the right moment and the right kind can do something that is transcendental in a way that other art forms do also succeed at, but it's very unique what music does. So something in the form of a song, there's the literal meaning of the words, and the music fills in the blank to make it a transcendent experience. So that's what can happen with music, and I think there's a high degree of success in a lot of the things. If I decide to put it out there, I believe it has that. But to the point, anyway, does that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So let me just sort of tease this out, though, because when we look at the Bible, whether you're religious or not, the idea that the Bible is the Word of God. So God gave the Word to man, but we don't necessarily hear about song. So how does singing a word, singing ideas, how does that differ or transmute something that simply stating the word does not?
Oh, well, it's not that the word can be it's simply in a different art form. In fact, many great poems don't lend themselves to music because the poem is the full range of one hopes to achieve is in the poem. It doesn't need music. Music, if you will, would get in the way. But a song is deliberately constructed so that there's a deliberate statement of intent that's clear and a deliberate withholding to let the music do something that only that juxtaposition can do. And so a songwriter is doing something different than a poet, although they can both be totally successful at the goal of achieving some sense of truth with a capital T.
Now, when you talk about songwriting, are you talking lyrical songwriting, or does this apply to Bach or Beethoven or the great classical masters?
Well, then someone like the classical masters are mostly doing it without words. So in the same way that the poet is doing it only with words, the composer is doing it only with music, and the songwriter is using a juxtaposition of the two. Hopefully, where it's at the highest level, all the forms are equal to each other, and either of them could achieve a magnificent goal, potentially.
But I guess the argument I would get to is God didn't send the Bible or the Torah, if you will, as a Bach composition. He set it down in words, or the people who interpreted it set it down in words. They didn't make Genesis the musical.
Good. So actually, though, that still goes to the heart of the question: how did God, the creator of everything, and therefore the creator of humans, and the creator of the human mind, how did he choose to communicate with people? Through the telling of a story. It's storytelling. So anybody who wishes to engage in storytelling is instinctively trying to embody the phrase when we want to cleave to God. We want to somewhat be like God. Cleaving to him is the general expression. Uh, we're engaging in that. So, but God decided to do it through a story. Now, you mentioned just a song and per se. In the narrative, particularly in the book of Exodus, there are a number of songs that are identified. It's actually the word song is used. There's a song of Moses by the sea. There's the song of Miriam. Um,
Song of
there's
Solomon.
the Song of Solomon. These things come out over time. So there, that is a form, and sometimes uh, the the word music is identified. So those are parts of the story, if you will. So in other words, God is talking to, why tell stories? Well, God communicates His truth to us through the form of a story, and we are the creatures made in the image of God, so we might seek to be like Him in some respect in our frame. You know,
So when
obviously,
someone is creating art or telling a story, is that mere mimicry of the divine, or is that somehow man trying to reach the divine but somehow failing?
I like that the way you said it. There, man somehow is trying to reach the divine, and sometimes, probably mostly failing. But you know what? Sometimes succeeding,
Hmm.
and that's a wonderful thing. You know
Well, what
that
let me just ask you then. What are a handful of the successes uh, of the divine art? Whether we're talking a film or a book or a poem or a song, what can you name a handful of things that you would consider divine in the sense that they are successful works of human art?
well, I would tend to agree with most of the historical assessments. If you're talking about great sculpture, you can't forget Michelangelo and the famous uh, classical painters. All rate. Shakespeare rates, Dostoevsky rates. You can get into popular music. There's so much of it. The only sin would be sin of omission, because there's a lot of very successful art. I just meant when we succeed, uh, the output of mankind for successful art is enormous. As individuals, we aspire to it, and we probably mostly fail. But if we're any good at all, we sometimes succeed, and that's what makes it worthwhile.
So, how would you then define success in art generally, and you personally? Do you consider yourself a successful actor? Do you consider yourself a successful musician? And if so, why or why not?
I consider myself successful in that I had an idea of why I wanted to do it, what I wanted to get from it. I hope to aspire to an exalted state of being that I could see manifested in certain works of art as a youth, um, and used art as a bridge to achieve those things within myself. Uh, and it was meaningful. So I know it from a subjective standpoint to be a meaningful thing to do and to aspire to. Um, One could do it with anything. One can do it with sports. One could do it with a commitment to a, a craftsmanship of some sort, um, successful interactions with people that uplift them. And there's lots of forms in which one might do this. So just to be glib, if you were, you could probably make an art form of selling shoes. If the right shoe was good for the right person, it would be a meaningful contribution to their life. So one could probably do it with anything, but there's just um, everyone has to follow their own pathway on that matter. So
So, as a performer, and since you are also doing interpretive art in the sense that if you did a cover song of something, let's say if you on one of your albums you covered a Buddy Holly song or a Bob
mhm,
Dylan song or something, um,
mhm.
is that enacting someone else's art? Then your art, in a sense, is merely interpreting someone else's. Does that strike you as strongly as creating your own song?
Well, I think that they're just different things. So there's, let's say, uh, well, I'll say someone I'd seen live in my youth, Frank Sinatra, for example. Frank Sinatra is an interpreter. He's not known as a songwriter.
Yeah.
He may have done that, but I'm not aware of what he's done. But what his interpretations alone are transcendent. You know, it takes a piece of material to another level, and most of the composers will admit they had no idea that what was in the song was in the song until they saw Frank do their song. So that's, and there are great classical interpreters, say on the violin, etc., or the piano. There is interpretation, and that's one dimension, and it's one I admire. I started out as a singer, of course, mostly singing other people's songs and choosing the material according to one's sensibility about what it is that you relate to and want to share with others. And that can shape somebody. And actually, that can shape somebody as a composer once they get in the skin of what is a good piece of material or something that really lets me say what I want to say. And you say, well, let me get more of that. And sometimes God delivers on those, if one is attuned to that. But I don't think there's a superior factor. No, the answer is I happen to, over time, gravitate to the songs that were sent to me. I felt a sense of mission to them, and thought that the skills I had as an interpreter were used to a good end. And but I still would do someone else's song, in a heartbeat. It just hasn't come up lately. Um, so, but I was blessed early on when I would perform in nightclubs when I'm simply a young man singing a song, and audiences would respond to me. So you get a sense whether you're in the zone for what people are. They are connecting at some level. So you say, well, let's continue.
So let me just ask to go back to the Frank Sinatra thing. A lot of people in this modern age, whether it's the arts or other things, will try to always say that there isn't any objectivity in the world, that everything is subjective. But if, for example, you were listening to two interpretations of a song, one by Sinatra and another by Tony Bennett, and you say that, well, Sinatra's version was better because of A, B, and C, whatever that might be. Um, uh, is that not something that you would then defend the opinion of that objectively so and so is better? Because you can watch a film like, say, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then you watch something like Plan 9 from Outer Space, which is a famously schlocky film, and clearly whether what you feel about Kubrick or what you feel, clearly the Kubrick film is the better film. But when you get people who are closer in dynamics, closer in that have similar arcs, like Bennett and a Sinatra. A lot of people don't want to make those kinds of those judgments. They'll say it's subjective rather. So when you're dealing with art, do you recognize that there are some art forms, artists, works of art that are better or not? Because a lot of people don't actually.
Well, I think there's a certain standard, and taking the difference between two acknowledged uh, internationally popular singers like Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett, clearly it shouldn't be any question. There's a certain quality there that and would be something of a matter of opinion. Uh, I don't mind, but and there are certainly things that are subpar. There is that for sure. So I mean, there are things that I wouldn't call art because they're not good enough, if you will. But going to the idea, I don't mind saying I personally prefer Sinatra's take to Tony Bennett's take, but I will say that Tony Bennett has an exquisite voice, and I love his approach. I had a privilege of sharing a stage with him in one of my appearances on television years ago in Las Vegas with Merv Griffin. He's exquisite. I mean, how you know, it's like sometimes there is just apples and oranges. Do you like diamonds or rubies? You know, we might acknowledge that diamonds tend to be more expensive, but you could get a given ruby that surpasses a given diamond, right? So,
Yeah. Let me, since we got about another 15 minutes or so, I wanted to ask what sacrifices have you made for your art, either acting or musically, and have they been worth it?
well, the sacrifice that one does to do anything well is the time and effort that you put in to do it. If you're going to become a competitive swimmer, you're going to have to put in a certain amount of mileage in the pool, and so that constitutes a sacrifice. That still doesn't guarantee winning a given race, and so but you do it nevertheless, and so there's the sacrifice of time and energy to achieve a higher level in any given endeavor, and that's true in martial arts. That's true in boxing. That's true in if you're a piano player or a guitar player. It's true if you're going to vocalize, and uh, there's mechanical things you do. When I said that some things are natural, does that mean you're not also trained? You may be naturally good at something. Personally, I'm a person, if I'm going to sing, I have to vocalize, and I do classical vocal exercises every day, and did since I was, I don't know, 17 or 18 years old, and basically don't miss a day if it's in my hand. So those are sort of ongoing things, and if you're going to, a certain level of fitness is required. So there's sacrifice involved in anything that you want to do. If I can digress for a minute, because you started by talking about my family, I just want to do a kind of a fill people in. All of my brothers are remarkable in their fashion. Uh, I'm the oldest of four from my mother and father, and so there's Graham is a gifted songwriter, is the one under me. Then Harry was a tremendously gifted actor and became is quite popular as a spiritual counselor, um, and that does a lot of public speaking to that end. Uh, Billy, of course, you know, for William Moses. He's made a name for himself worldwide, so it speaks for itself.
And
My
ironically, he just had a stint on General Hospital decades after you did.
That's interesting. I think I heard that through a note you sent to my associate Brian. Um, but so what else? Uh, to My sons are. I've written screenplays with both my oldest son Rick, my next son Tarrant. They're brilliant artists. They've gone into other fields themselves. They were in their time two of the finest martial artists I've ever seen. My son Ronson is a world champion bodybuilder, also a gifted martial artist. Um, the My son Adam, extraordinary athlete, but extraordinary filmmaker and writer and composer and multi instrumentalist. In music. And my son Dan has a book coming out. He's 23 years old, has written a book called, interestingly enough, A Prayer. That should be coming out in about a month. My son Naftali is a public speaker, and he is inspirational. And he talks about some of the ideas you and I have talked about, and he helps people. And that they're, of course, they're all physically dynamic, and those are things that come as gift from God. I just want to mention those things because someone who's interested in me, my family, and Billy, they should know about Graham and Harry. They should know about my sons because they're all doing interesting things, and I appreciate the opportunity to share that with you. So
Well,
go ahead, go back. Let's go back to where you wanted to pick up.
well,
Also, one other thing. I don't want to mention Robert Mills is the producer of my latest album, The Heart of the King. Robert Mills is the leader of the band The Hailers, a really extraordinary original Celtic rock band, and Robert himself is a brilliant musician who performs a lot. So people should look into his work and The Hailers. and then our collective work, which is there in the album "The Heart of the King."
Well, I will link.
So
I will link to your own website. I'll link to was it the one that has all the albums, and also your Wikipedia page if you want. Um, I
wonderful.
what yeah I wanted to just get back to one or two things, and then I got a couple closing questions. You had mentioned early on about comedy when during the Merv Griffin stuff that you didn't want the apple and orange thing. Is there a particular within the acting field? Is there a particular stage, TV, film, or comedy drama that you prefer? Is that or were you adept at all of them?
I'd like to say I was adept at all of them. That's my own take on myself, for sure. You know, yeah.
And then finally, I ask everyone that I speak to in the arts, and especially the actors, what advice would you give to any young actors and any young musicians? And if there's a difference in that advice, why?
Um, Actors or young musicians, I see. No, I think there is. If you have a passion to do something, where does that? What is the meaning of that? Where does it come from? Um, and there's no reason not to pursue it. And by the way, some of the best artists I've ever seen, uh, certainly some of the world famous people, are as good as they say they are. They are amongst the best in the world, and self-evidently so, and deservedly so, appreciated in public. But there are an enormous amount of people that are equally good that will never make the public eye, or not because they're not good enough, but because there's a lot of circumstances as to why something becomes publicly known. That's a separate matter as to the issue of who's actually good. And so just so that it doesn't, but you can, doesn't mean you couldn't be fulfilled as an artist, even without fame. So seek excellence, don't seek fame, and fame may or may not come, but excellence will always be its own reward. And I would say that's true in acting and in music and virtually anything.
Well, just so you know, just picking up on that, Shakespeare's work was forgotten for about 100 years, and Bach's music was forgotten for like 200 years. It wasn't until I forget whether it's Beethoven or maybe it was Liszt, someone said, "Hey, this guy has been hanging around for 200 years and no one's been playing him." And then about 200 years ago, in the early 1800s, Bach became the Bach that we know, but he was still Bach even when he wasn't Bach, if you know what I'm saying.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's almost kind of amusing, because if you're in the public eye and there is some sort of inclination for people who, if you're not doing something in worldwide media, there's an inclination for people to say, well, where have you been? What have you been doing? This is, hey man, just, there's life, man. Don't forget that. And I do think there is something of a trap for people who pursue the limelight at the expense of the human experience, the sum total of what the human experience should entail. So that's a cautionary tale for those who are currently rich and famous, as the saying goes. They better be careful to live life well.
Well, I want to thank you for spending over an hour speaking to me. We had a little miscommunication in terms of getting the interview on, but it was well worth it. And it forced me to sort of juggle a few things that I want to do, and it was a very productive conversation. And I'll link to everything, and people can find out about your music and other endeavors. So, thank you very much, Rick.
Dan, great. It was really a pleasure speaking with you, and a pleasure that we got a chance to talk. Hope
Yeah.
we can do it again sometime. All right.
Sure. Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Be well. Be well.
Okay.
Bye bye.